Welcome to another conversation on the All About You podcast. It is exactly what it sounds like, a podcast dedicated to the interesting, the wonderful, and the eclectic world of you, the listener. I have created this podcast as a journey of discovery about people. Past episodes have included dyslexia, knowing your superpower, and living on a narrowboat, to name just a few. I am your host, Sheila, and let's meet this week's guest. Well, I'm very, very happy to be able to introduce somebody living in Valencia, and my guest today is Cate, and she's an author. So, Cate, welcome to the All About You podcast.
Hello, thank you very much. It's very exciting to be here.
So, Cate, we've only actually met twice.
It's true, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to hearing about your story. So you are an author. So Can we talk about you becoming an author and making this your passion and your career?
Yes, so I'm 50 years old now, so I'm quite kind of elderly to be starting out as an author. You know, usually authors are in their 30s when they start getting an agent and getting published. So I was inspired to become a writer because for the past 15 years, me and my husband have been running a book marketing company. So I always wanted to be a writer, but I didn't really understand how. And I was always writing stories and books. And I wrote a non-fiction book in 2010, which was about me being an animal lover and a vegetarian, and how did I combine that with living in Spain. At the time, bullfighting was a really big deal. That book did quite well. I sold hundreds of copies in Spain, mostly for the expat community who didn't really understand bullfighting. And I went to bullfights. It was really traumatic for me, actually, but it was a really good experience of how you put a book together. And from that experience, I thought, well, I'd quite like to do it with fiction now that I've done this one book that was fairly successful. And so I decided to leave Spain for 2 years and do a master's in creative writing. So I had to interview for a lot of courses in London. Being an older student, it was quite daunting, but I managed to get on the City University master's course. And so we left my beloved Spain and we went back to London for 2 years, and I did this course. And I kept being top of the class every time I wrote something, and I couldn't believe it. I remember the first day I was top of the class, like, oh, this is the best one this week. They always used to do like this thing where they would say the one that they liked the best. And I couldn't believe it. The first time it happened, I was kind of with tears in my eyes, like, oh, I'm quite good at this. And that turned out to be that I won the prize for the best novel of the master's course. And I made some really great friends on that course. Everyone was younger than me, but it didn't matter. I've still got friends from that course. And what we started doing as a group was a night in London, which was, guess what, a literary open mic. And this was run by a writer called Brian Kelly, who now runs a press called Insurgent Press in London. And he started this night called Club VD, Club Verbal Discharge, because it's catching. And we all used to get up and read bits of our books or our poems. And so that was wildly successful. And we made a lot of friends. Everybody was having a great time with that and feeling very inspired. But I couldn't stand living in England. I just had to come back to Spain. So we moved back to Valencia. I really missed it. And so I just carried on writing. And my first novel was rubbish, let's just say it like that. And so I discarded the one I did at college. It was just too convoluted, I think. And I ended up not really knowing what I was going to write and was really frustrated. And then one day I was walking on my own with my dog, and it was completely deserted. And I thought, you know what, if the world ended right now, I wouldn't know. It could have ended right now. There was not a soul to be seen in this whole place, and not a car going by. And I thought, how creepy. And when I got home, I started having this idea for my new book, which was a woman on her own, somewhere remote, who doesn't know that the world has ended. And so that's how I came up with the first part of my story. that's the basic of how I got to the point where I was writing the book that got picked up by an agent. So.
I mean, the thing is, Kate, there was so much to unpick with what you've just said. First of all, you started by saying you came into writing very late in life.
Yeah.
I think that's quite interesting because I've met a lot of people who are writing, but they are, if not retired, very close to writing.
Yeah.
And a lot of those people are saying, oh, I've always enjoyed reading and, you know, I've written a few short stories.
Yeah.
And now they've got the time to do it.
Yeah.
So I think this is a great thing that, you know, this may be a second career for somebody, something you can do when you want to do it and do it purely as a passion project.
Yeah.
The second thing was, as in you left your beloved Spain and went back to the UK purely to study and to refine your craft and to learn and be educated and be surrounded by other writers. That was a big thing to do. I mean, presumably your husband was supportive of packing up and going as well?
Yes, my husband always comes with me, obviously, but he's from Los Angeles, and we actually met online, and I lived in Los Angeles with him, and we got married in Los Angeles. So, but I had real problems with Los Angeles. It was kind of a bit of a culture shock to be there after being in Spain. I actually persuaded him to come and live in Spain with me after we'd been in LA for 2 years. And he always trusts me if I say, right, okay, it's time to go somewhere else. Luckily, he's a bit of a nomad like me, so he's okay to jump around and try out different experiences. And one of his weaknesses is, well, like, let's just say some Americans find it quite hard to learn a second language, whereas, you know, we've been sort of, in England even, we've sort of been inundated with European languages from an earlier age, whereas he finds it really hard to speak Spanish. So anytime I say, let's go to London, he's always up for it because he can understand everybody. You know, I mean, it's a bit of a problem. Whereas, you know, I've done French and German before, so I found Spanish not too bad. So, yeah, that he didn't mind coming with me. I like London, but probably the same as you. I like going to England sometimes, but it is a bit much. It's a bit rich, isn't it? When you go there, I always want to get back to Spain when I'm in England. So it really was just the experience of, if we go there, I'm going to be immersing myself in this course. It's not going to be like we're moving back to London. It was just for that.
I mean, that's very brave in itself, isn't it? Going back to studying, you know, you're probably going to be one of the more mature students.
Yeah.
And putting yourself in that environment for a long period of time. Yeah. And obviously doing a university course is never cheap. So that's a big commitment, changing countries, you know, taking your husband with you and adopting and adapting to that new lifestyle for a period of time. I mean, that's a huge commitment, Kate.
It was a huge commitment. I found it very, very difficult on lots of levels to go back to English ways of life. For instance, I always forget that there's no Persianas in England, so I always felt like we're going to be burgled every minute. Carpet, oh my God, my pet hate carpet. And then things like just the way people are, it's very different, isn't it? And public transport isn't so good. Cold, obviously. So all these things actually really quite depressing. And they were all the reasons I'd left England, like most of us. I was really, really dedicated to getting this master's because I realised that I didn't know enough about writing. I work with self-publishers every day because that's what we do with our book marketing site. We are with Self-Publishing Review, it's called, and we are dedicated to helping self-publishers and independent writers. I realised there's a big difference between writing for a passion and writing to be a professional novelist. And I was not prepared for what I found out at all. It was such a gulf, and the things I learned on that course, it was like magic, really. I couldn't have known what I didn't know, put it that way. It was amazing.
I think that's with any learning anything, isn't it? You know, you sort of get to a point, the 4 stages of learning, you know, you don't realise what you don't know, and then when you do, it's like, oh my God.
Yeah.
So Cate, can we talk about your writing process? Because when I talk to people who are writing a book, who have written books, I get this romantic vision that you take yourself off to some little cottage, rather like Colin Firth in Love Actually. You know, you've got a beautiful window overlooking a lake, someone's bringing you food and drink at intervals. It's probably not like that at all, is it?
No, it's horrible, actually, when you're actually doing proper professional novel writing. What happens is you have to have, I call it the skin of my ego was completely rubbed off in the first year, because you can't be weird about criticism. You're going to have editors telling you, get rid of that, get rid of that, get rid of that. And you have to take it on board and you have to do it. And I think a lot of writers who decide to self-publish do so because they can't take that criticism. And I remember I was, in the beginning, always kicking back on it and saying, I'm not going to change that. I worked really hard on that. And, you know, obviously there's some part of you, it's your baby, you don't want to change it. So I think the hardest lesson of writing a novel is that you've got to be prepared for the amount of editing. I don't think I was. And that really kills quite a lot of creativity. And you have to learn to get that creativity back. So, for instance, I'll give you an example. The book manuscript that I wrote last year, the one that's been accepted, I wrote that book twice, because the first time I wrote it, the agent turned around to me and said, oh yeah, it's okay, but could you just write the whole thing again with my notes? And I literally had to write it from a different point of view, the whole book, and change the way the character spoke to make it clearer. And that took a whole year. And can you imagine, you finish the book, you think it's ready, an agent has accepted it, and they says, oh, actually, can you just write the whole thing again? I mean, it's crazy. And sometimes when you're writing, you think, what I've written is just a load of old nonsense, and you read it back and it is, and you have to scrap your 3 or 4 hours work. There's a muse that sits on your shoulder for sure, and the way that stories come to me is almost like automatic writing. I don't even know what I'm writing, to the point that sometimes I'll read it back a few days later and think, oh, I don't remember writing that. It's almost like I'm just channeling something in the ether that is going through my fingertips. So I don't know if you know A.S. Byatt, in her book Possession, she talks about something coming through her fingertips to the typewriter, like a possession. And it's a bit like that for me. And that's when I know it's good. If I'm trying to sort of write, you know, something and it's starting to sound like the cat sat on the mat, which it can do, kind of laborious, I know it's not going to work. If I've written a page and it's kind of, I don't even know where I'm going with it, and I don't even understand why I've written it, then I know, keep going.
It sounds almost as if you're getting this sort of the secret power where the story's created and you are just the vessel that's putting it down on the typewriter or the keyboard or pen and pencil, however people write these days.
Yeah, I think it's true. How it usually happens with me, like it happened with that one, the whole book will come fully formed, but I don't know how I'm going to write it. So I'll get the whole idea from beginning to end as if I'm seeing a movie flash forward. And then I'll think, okay, but how does that work? And then I'll sit down, and usually it sounds really bizarre, but usually I'll have like a little voice in my head that will give me the first sentence. And then once I have the first 4 or 5 words, I'm off and I can write. When I first started writing, I could sit down and work for 18 hours at a time, with my husband bringing, a bit like you said, actually, with my husband bringing me food and drink. But then after a while, I decided, oh, come on, I've got to pace myself. And then I sort of did it more like a business. So I'm doing it a certain hours of the day. And I never push myself. If I don't feel like I should be doing it, I say, all right, don't do it. The muse isn't here, not going to work. And that usually means the next day I'll do more. So it's all right to do that, you know.
I mean, I guess it's one of those things, isn't it? You think, okay, I'm going to write a book. I guess some people treat it like a job. Okay, I'm going to sit at my desk by 9:30 with a coffee
Yeah.
That sounds great as a plan, but in reality, absolutely nothing may come. And I've heard people say, yeah, I've got myself all organised. Yep, good night's sleep. Sit down, nothing.
Well, yeah.
Absolutely nothing. And then other times they're in the shower thinking about shopping, and then all of a sudden the story, the characters, and they literally cannot get out that shower quick enough to at least put something down on a scrap of paper before they lose it. So it's one of those things, isn't it? Particularly, I guess, if you've got an agent, they are expecting you to produce so many words by a certain point of time.
Yeah.
And that must be quite difficult when you're trying to be creative.
Well, there is kind of a cliche in Hollywood movies where you sort of have these films where, oh, you know, it starts off a writer has writer's block and he's having lunch with his agent. He's got to deliver the amount of words. It doesn't work like that. How it works is that your agent says to you, you're now going to do these edits. You tell me when you think you'll be done by. So then you tell her that, well, I tell my agent, who is at Cate Baum in London, she'll send me an email and I'll say, okay, I think I'll be done by this day. And then she says, let me know if you're not going to be, because they don't want to rush you. They want you to make sure that you've got everything done how you need it to be done. When you get a publisher, which is the situation I'm in now, then deadlines are harder. So what happens then is when you're tidying up the edit, you've got a publisher saying you need to be done, like at the moment, I need to be done by February. That's a hard deadline. In the creation process, not so much. And an agent will never take you on until you've got a whole fully formed novel. It's more about the publishing deadlines later that you have to do those weird hurry up type of things. But by then, you've got the book so ingrained in your brain, it's almost natural to you to do the edits quickly and be okay with them because you know everything about the book, you know.
I mean, Kate, you seem to be quite far down the road, but let's say somebody has written a book. This is their masterpiece. Yeah, it's going to be made into a movie. How do they find an agent? I mean, we hear a lot of people who are self-publishing now. That person's got their book. How do they go about getting an agent? Do you just Google an agent in London or Sheffield or wherever you live? What's the process?
Okay, so how I did it was that on my master's course, we were given a spreadsheet of agents that are available and open to submission, and then told what kind of books they publish. That spreadsheet turned out was a bit out of date, so I went through it, and that was kind of my source. There are a few places online where authors have put together spreadsheets. How I got mine, there was a woman who was doing a blog about writing, and she'd done a spreadsheet. It was on Patreon, and for $6 I could download it. So that's what I did, and that gave me my starting point. However, it wasn't entirely necessary, because what you can do is go on Google, as you said, and find there are listings of agents that you can go onto, and there's even submission portals that you can use. I found they're more for American writers. They're more in America when they're portals. But even so, it gave me an indication of what kind of agents might accept what kind of books. Because the thing about an agent, everyone by our age, more or less, has rented or sold a house. And the relationship with the agent that you choose for that is really important. Their personality, the way they look. I mean, I don't know about you, but I've even chosen estate agents by the way they look in their picture. I mean, it's ridiculous, but there's something in a human being that means you have to click, you know. And so for me, what I did was I looked at all the bios of all the agents, and I would see if I liked the look of them. And that sounds really weird, but it actually works, because sometimes I would think, this agent, I don't really like the look of them, but I'll send them my book anyway. And I was always right. They always rejected me every time straight away. The ones that don't are the ones that you like the look of in the first place, because it's almost a two-way street, the chemistry, even like that. So I quickly learned two things. Never just get a big list of agents and send your book out to everyone, because if you get a rejection on one, you're going to get the whole lot rejected. What you need to do is send it to 3 or 4 and see what they say, because they might come back to you and say, the voice isn't right, the setting isn't right, the story isn't gripping enough, and then you've wasted your one chance with everybody. So I started sending it out in batches of 3 or 4, and funnily enough, what happened to get my agent, who is Sive Curran at Curtis Brown, was my friend Brian, who runs Club VD, said to me, I met this woman the other day who's an agent at Curtis Brown. Why don't you send her your book? And I thought, all right, nothing to lose. He said, she's very nice. And because I get on so well with Brian, I thought, well, if he thinks she's nice. And of course, I got the acceptance. Well, I got the acceptance if I rewrote the whole book, but she accepted it, and it was pretty straightforward. So it's like dating or anything. It's like once you hit on the right one, you'll get the agent, but it can take years. I mean, it's a really, really slow thing, the book industry. If you think I finished writing my book, this book that's now going to the publisher in 2017 or 18, and it's not going to be published until 2025, you've really got to have some patience and some stamina with it, you know.
Let's say the scenario is you've written your book, an agent's accepted it, you've done the whole rewrite, they're happy with it. So you have got your book completely edited, you're happy, agent's happy. How do you go about getting it published?
Okay, so you need an agent to get a publisher. There are publishers out there who are vanity publishers. In other words, you can pay them to publish your book. Assisted publishing is where they're not a publisher, but they are a service that can help you get your book published. Perfectly fine, perfectly legitimate. A lot of people have gone on to be wildly successful authors doing it this way. For instance, E.L. James, who wrote 50 Shades of Grey, was a self-published writer. You can start like that, but with an agent, what the process is when you think the book is ready, because she wants to edit it first as well, you have to strip off a bit more of your ego with your agent. She'll say to you, okay, I have this list of people I know who work in publishing, and I'm going to send your manuscript to these people. What do you think? So then my job was to go through the list and research the publishers to see if I liked them. In my case, I rejected 3 of her ideas and I gave her 2 of my own. And she sent it out to all of them then, blanket sent it out because she's Curtis Brown, so they're going to look at it. And then what happens is some of them come back and say no immediately. But then what happens is you go into what they call a bidding war. So you get one offer in with one of the editors at the publisher, because you've got more editing to do after you get the publisher. And then other publishers will be given a deadline once that first offer comes in. Okay, so now by Wednesday, everybody else has to put an offer in for the book. And then the highest bidder or the best offer, because they're not the same thing, get the book and go to publish it within the year, usually.
Once the publisher has accepted it, they then offer you a price for your book. Is that they have sole rights to that book after that? Or, I mean, I'm sort of thinking about the cover. Do you decide on the cover? Do they come up with ideas for the cover, the lettering for the cover?
You don't get any say whatsoever in the cover. Once you've sold the book, that's it. If you want a say in the cover, you need to self-publish. I'm going to have to accept whatever cover they give me. I do have some things about that. Like, for instance, I know there's a trend at the moment, especially in women's fiction, for putting pictures of women neck down. I don't know if you've seen this on the cover of books, like headless women, just their bodies. And I'm like, well, that's not going to happen. Like, I would put my foot down on that. So you can kind of complain if you don't like a design, but honestly, you don't have any say. If I get a headless woman cover, then, oh well, I'm going to have to accept it. But the thing about covers is that you won't just get one cover. You will get maybe 12 covers, because they do a different cover for every single iteration of the book. Every time it's published anew, the editions, and also the different countries will have different covers. I'm friends with 2 quite well-known writers, Claire Fuller and Julie Meyerson, and they quite often put their covers on Instagram because they're getting new ones all the time, you know, and some of them are really nice and some of them are a bit but it's not up to them. So they just have to go, oh, well, I like that one, I don't like that one. As for the input on the, lettering font, same thing, nothing. I can't do anything about that. But that's okay, because you're going to get your book published on the bright side. So,
I mean, I find that quite astonishing, Kate, because as a reader, when you go to a bookshop, you are drawn to covers, not just the picture of the cover. Sometimes it's the texture. You look at it, you think, oh, wow, that's got gold embossed, or that's got a really nice picture, or, the actual feel of the cover. So I'm very much attracted to that type of thing.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
And the fact that you as an author, your baby's going to go out there and you've got no say in the cover, the colour, the font, the design at all. I'm astounded by that.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, when I was researching the publishers that she sent me, I actually rejected 2 of them for that exact reason, because I was like, I'm not going to have one of those covers because they were ugly and I didn't want them. They looked cheap. So I actually rejected 2 of them based on the way they were presenting the books, because I thought, well, if they're going to present their books like that, how many am I going to sell? I'm not going to sell any. And I did think of that. So that would be part of the process of which ones are you going to go with. The ones that I selected, I said yes to, they all had nice covers. And I was, well, maybe not entirely my taste, some of them, but I thought, well, presentable, professional, look nice. So that was part of my process, I think, of choosing. You did ask me about rights as well. What happens with rights? That's part of what I was talking about with money or something else in the deal. So is it the best deal, or it's not necessarily the highest bidding deal? Because personally, I think it's better to take a lower amount of money, and I'll tell you why. Because there was a girl in my master's course before me who had a huge book deal. She got like £120,000 or something for her book. Plus you get about 10 or 15% on each book that is sold after that. And you have to make whole, as they call it, earn back your advance. Otherwise you owe the publisher money. That's basically it. So it's dangerous, because with her, she did one book and then she didn't get another book because she didn't make back that money. It was amazing. Everyone was like, wow, she got this big book deal. So for me, it's better to have a smaller advance and then sell a lot of books. So what I was looking for in a book deal was somebody who is dedicating themselves to marketing me once they have published the book. So what's happening right now in this sorting out of the offer that I've had is I've asked for them to do marketing as part of the signed deal that we have, so that I know that I'm going to get really good support when it comes to doing all the promotion. I mean, it's what I do for a living, and I know that if it's not done, there are a lot of publishers out there that don't do marketing. They just print the book and somehow expect everyone to buy it, which of course never happens. Especially self-publishers. Some self-publishers that I've worked with, they'll sell 3 books. That would be to their dog, the vicar, and their old teacher from primary school, and they haven't, and it's a myth that all your friends are going to buy your book. Your friends never buy your book. You think, oh, I've got loads of friends, that'll be all right. Nobody buys it. It's tough. You have to make some calls on that. But marketing is the thing in a book deal, definitely.
I mean, when we started this conversation, Kate, I thought the hard bit was going to be the hard graft in writing the book. My mind has so changed just talking about the editing process, the publishing, sorting out the right deal, because I guess with films and TV, oh, you've written a bestseller, you're going to get £1 million advance, and they want your second book, your third book, and you're traveling all around the world doing your book launch. It's not like that, is it?
No, I mean, with my deal, I have got world rights built into it. So I have sold it. Well, I will have sold it different countries like the US and Europe and stuff. But within that, it still means that I'm going to have to do loads of promotion. I've already signed up to have to go to the UK to do promotion already. So it's going to be hard graft. It's not just going to be like, oh, I'm going to sell loads of books because I got a book deal. It's not going to happen like that.
The interesting thing is, Kate, your full-time job is basically in the book industry.
Yeah.
And you are having to go through all this process, and you've got insider knowledge. So
Yeah.
somebody who is trying to do, you know, the 50 Shades, I'm just going to sit at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee and bang out a bestseller that's going to get me $1 million advance. The hurdles you're having to go through and the tough decisions you're having to make about your baby, it's just astonishing. This has so opened up my eyes. Talking about writing the book, editing, publishing, can you tell us a little bit about the book?
Okay, so the working title is Land of Hope. It's a story about the UK. It's set in England on an unnamed moor, which is really a mixture of all the moors in England. So big, kind of cloudy, dark places, very remote, lots of nature. So what we are going to see in this book is there is a woman who lives with her dog in the middle of the forest in the near future. And one night there is a terrible noise and she doesn't know what it is. And then the book is about her finding out what that noise has done to the rest of the world, and the journey that she makes to find her husband, who is far away. I won't tell you who he is or what he is. On her way, she meets a young boy, and they have to travel together in a sort of hero's journey at the end of the world across moorland. And it's extremely difficult for them to do everything they need to do to survive. So I guess you could say it's a bit like The Road by Cormac McCarthy, where you've got an adult and a child making a hero's journey in very difficult circumstances. But it's also a book that's very much about England and, you know, sort of post-Brexit England, and how things have sort of decayed away a little bit, and the way people treat each other, and how selfish people can be in times of strife. I think we all learned from COVID there were two types of people, weren't there? There were people that helped each other and people that didn't, let's say. And so it was all kind of, it was actually written pre-COVID, weirdly. Those sentiments are in there, and it was really a book that I wanted to write about big themes, but make the story very small. So it's only about a few characters in a very remote setting, but you get a lot of information about why they're there and what's happening in the bigger world in their actions. It's literary fiction. It's always difficult to explain literary fiction.
This is due for release in 2025, you said?
2025, yes. I can't tell you exactly the publisher right now because I have to sign the papers and everything, but yes, it will be. It'll be in the UK and US in 2025. I think Europe a bit later on, but yeah, in English anyway in 2025. So that's pretty good.
Well, good luck with the book, and you've definitely sold one copy to me.
Oh, good. I actually have
an advanced copy. Kate, you briefly mentioned the Hemingway Club. So can we talk about the Hemingway Club? Because this is how you and I met. You organise it, you run it. Can you explain Hemingway Club?
The Hemingway Club, or Club Hemingway as it is in Spanish. We started this, me and my friend Edgar, who's from Guatemala, who is also a writer. We started this in Recife, actually, in a bar in Recife. And the first one we did was a bit weird. I was missing club VD, so I decided to put on one in Spain and see who turned up, you know. And it turned out that, well, 45 people turned up in this tiny bar, packed it out, and there wasn't any space, and the microphone didn't work, and it was quite terrible, really. But everyone enjoyed themselves. It's only a couple of hours, but it was really interesting. And so I did ask the venue if we could do it again there, and they said no. So I was like, all right then. So I went to Radio City, where we are now, and I thought they're never going to say yes because it's such a nice venue. And they said yes. So that's how we got into Radio City. And I think that that's a great venue because we have the stage, we have the lighting. It's like a proper theatre performance for everybody. So I think instead of these sort of scruffy, sweaty little get-togethers that most people seem to do for writers, I decided we'd do one that's comfortable, you know, like air conditioning, tables and chairs, nice drinks, nice waiting staff. And we've got all of that at our venue, and they're absolutely lovely. And it's just growing and growing. I mean, there's 130 members on Meetup now, I think. And there's more on Facebook that don't belong to Meetup. So I have no idea. It's probably more like 150 altogether have signed up.
You've talked about the venue at Radio City in Valencia, but what is it people go along to do? So you've got an audience, but what are they there to see?
So the basic concept of the one in London and WD was anyone can get up and read their book or their poetry or talk on the microphone in the English language for 4 or 5 minutes and share it with other people who are going to be supportive. I really wanted it to be an international audience of English-speaking people. I didn't want it to be an expat community. I wanted it to be international, which I think I've achieved now. We've got people from, I think we've got about 15 countries now coming along. A lot of people who are writers write in English, whether they're English or not, English speaking or not natively. And so the idea is to give them a platform in Valencia, because it's kind of our common tongue, isn't it, between all of us. I decided to set up the same thing. 4 or 5 minutes, you can put your name in the bowl. I'll pick it out at random. You can get up on the stage and read practically anything you want. We're a very tolerant crowd, I think. I wanted it to be super inclusive and super tolerant and open to any subject, really. And as you know, sometimes we get confessions, sometimes we get comedy. I'm looking at you, Sheila. And sometimes we get very interesting, intricate poems or romantic writing. So it's a real range of writing from so many different people. And it just makes for an interesting listen, because you never know what you're going to get, do you? It's like somebody pops up, and all different ages. I mean, I think the oldest member we have is 87, and then the youngest one, I think, is only 18, who read the other night. So real range of people. And I think it's become quite special, that relationship. So
the amount of people that have spent time writing a short story, a poetry, a piece about something that happened in their life, and then they get up on that stage underneath the lights in front of a microphone to people they know and maybe audience members they don't know, and read their original work. I just think that, because speaking in front of people is like the number one fear.
Yeah, for most people, yeah.
And for people to do that and literally showcase their original work, I think is just amazing.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, when I'm sitting at the side watching people, like last time we had a gentleman who's never read before, and I could see, if I get a piece of paper, it was doing that as he was reading. He was absolutely terrified. His knees were knocking. So, I mean, I have no problem getting up on the stage. I'm like you. I'm just like, I don't care. You get to an age where you don't care, I think. But, you know, a lot of people have never done it before. And I remember when I started, I used to be terrified, and you get used to it. And it's part of the process of being a writer, because you have to give readings when you become a writer. It's a learned skill set, isn't it? So I think I'm giving people a practice room as well, with a nice audience.
I think it's absolutely amazing what you're doing, Kate, because it must take an awful lot of time and effort to organise it. Giving a platform for people to show their original work is just incredible. And I've only been twice, and I am just blown away by it. And I'm telling everybody I know, come along. I just think it's absolutely fantastic what you are doing.
Thank you. Well, I think as well, what's fantastic is I'm surprised by how many people don't read and they just come and listen. Don't you think that's amazing? Like, people, when they walk in, I'll say, hey, I'm the host. Are you reading or listening? I'm surprised it's about 50-50 that people are actually only coming to listen, which I think is amazing. And there are some people that are coming for language exchange reasons. They don't speak very good English, and they're thinking, oh, it'll do me good to hear some creative writing. And there's other people who simply come every time. I'm thinking one woman in particular who has come to every single one but has no interest in writing. She just likes listening to everybody talking about their work. So it's become something I didn't expect, actually. I didn't expect to have a crowd who weren't writing as well. It's a nice combination now, I think. Got supporters.
Obviously, I'm putting the word out about the Hemingway Club, and I just think it's absolutely brilliant what you're doing. So, Cate, can I just say a huge, huge thank you for you taking us through the process of writing a book. It has so opened up my eyes. I started off with a romantic image of Colin Firth, and it's not. It's, as you say, your ego gets bashed left, right and centre, all the rewrites, having to make some incredibly difficult decisions if you get to the point of actually selling your book. That's huge, Cate, and I wish you all the luck and the success in the world for 2025 with the birth of your baby.
Thank you very much.
So thank you for listening to the podcast. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. Please subscribe for future episodes. It is free. And if you have a story to tell, please contact me on allaboutyoupodcast@yahoo.com and let's tell your story.